You know, since I began martial arts as a child, it has since been a journey for me, a way of life, and nothing has changed. I started at a very young age, inspired by Bruce Lee for the most part, and I had an uncle who's passed away now, Willie Bates, who introduced me to combat jiu-jitsu. And there were a few other friends that began to give me instruction before I entered into my first commercial school. Upon starting martial arts officially in the 70s, some of what I was being taught, I came to find out many years later, was incomplete. My mind was always open. As someone that wanted to experience the whole martial arts experience and not just be restricted to any one particular way of doing things. And every opportunity that I got, I would train with other systems and or styles. What I did mostly at that time was Korean martial arts. And I didn't know any better. I was always dedicated, always devoted, always loyal, always punctual. And I loved the martial arts from my inception. However, I was never complete in my mind. You know how something just speaks to you? You can call it intuition if you will, but I knew something was missing. I couldn't just do one thing. There came a point in time that I left during the early years of my military training and inception into the martial arts, or the military, I should say. And as I continued through my trek in the martial arts, even through the military, I came to find out that some of my instructors at my previous school never had fully received some of the instruction from their instructor, the great grandmaster, who was my great grandmaster actually, Kwan Wan An. Love that man sincerely. I learned a lot of things from great grandmaster An. I would go visit his school. These were later years. And I would tell him that I was studying other arts alongside the Korean arts. And he said, it takes a lifetime to learn even just one art. I admired that. Those were his words to me. But I had the idea of taking and using that which was useful for me as I was developing. And I did not want to be boxed in or pigeonholed, as they say. But I found out something about my instructors, and there were several instructors under Grandmaster An. He did not teach them everything. There were some things that he withheld. They never spoke of these things because they didn't know and or they were not aware. I found this out years later. And even some of my instructors uh, was not well versed in some things. You know, it's easy to run a kata Japanese or pums Korean, but it's a totally different thing to be able to understand what makes it work in actual combat or fighting, if that is not what your teacher is giving you. So I had been on a journey, as I forestated, all of these years, and I had been taking the things that I have been learning throughout my career and synthesizing everything that worked for me, that was practical for me and for the average person. And consequently, I derived a system that I named earlier, or later I should say. I created it in the early 80s and I named it in the 90s. Jinin Do. Jinin is a Japanese word which means very natural, and Do is way. And what it simply is, taking the individual, instead of trying to make them conform to something that someone else has created and put their stamp on, it is giving them a foundation first and allowing them to build upon that foundation to fit them, the individual. I learned later, as I began to say, that some things were not given to some of my instructors as I was coming up through the commercial school again. And to this very day, those former instructors more than likely still don't have those other pieces. But I can say that I do, because I made it my quest to find out, why is this being done in this form? What is this a move for? Japanese Okinawan call it bunkai. What is the purpose of that technique? So I ventured off into pressure points. I ventured off into more aikijitsu. And the highest part of my system is Zui Kwan, drunken boxing. And that's one of the staple things that made me very popular in the martial arts competition arena, was drunken boxing. Very well known for that. And so everyone can't do that. I'm older now. I have an arthritic hip. And I have had 2 strokes. But I'm grateful to the Creator that I'm still here and that I can articulate. I can still speak to you, to my family, all things considered. But my system is still going. And I'm preparing to do a couple books within the next year. And I'm grateful to be clothed in my right mind and still have the ability to teach of substance with fervor and with passion. That's very important to me. So again, some of the things that should have been passed on to my instructors during the 70s, early 80s, they didn't know. But I found out later on those things that were missing, and I picked them up. And again, I'm grateful. So I say this to you, and I didn't expect to move forward this way. But I say this to you, aspiring martial artists, black belts, masters, and so forth. Don't get so locked into what you're doing as far as tradition goes. Make sure that you don't ever lose yourself, and that you can step outside that box at will. This wisdom has been presented to you by Grandmaster Stroud, affectionately known as Brother Teacher. As my one friend says, shut up and just simply train. That was it, and that was all. Thank you, Master Holly. So long.